These are the most disturbing leaked footage, arranged in the form of an iceberg. We'll start with the strange and unsettling, but as the video goes on, each layer will get darker until we reach the truly horrific. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Level 1. Bohemian Grove. YouTuber Dancer 1 wasn't chasing clicks, at least not entirely. What drove him into the woods of Northern California was something older and sharper. Curiosity about a place most people only whispered about. Bohemian Grove. A 700-acre retreat hidden among the redwoods in Monte Rio, owned by the elite Bohemian Club. For over a century, it's been a symbol of power and secrecy, a playground for politicians, CEOs, and artists where outsiders are never welcome. The Grove's reputation had always been toxic fuel for conspiracy theories, satanic rituals, political king-making, allegations of abuse. But Dancer 1 wanted more than rumors. In the off-season, when the camp was empty and the nights were colder, he launched a kayak across the Russian River and slipped onto the property. Under the cover of towering trees and silence, he hiked uphill through mud and fallen needles until the shadows opened into a clearing. There it was, the 40-foot owl. Its concrete wings stretched wide above a stage of stone, the center of the club's cremation of care ritual. Seeing it in person, he later said, felt different from the photos. Bigger, heavier, a monument to something you weren't supposed to understand. But as he moved deeper, the quiet shifted. Cameras stared down from hidden perches. Security patrolled the trails. There were sensors, maybe even tripwires. In that moment, he understood how quickly curiosity could turn dangerous. He left before anyone noticed. But he didn't stay away. According to his own accounts, he came back again during the Grove's July encampment when the cremation of care was performed. This time, he said he caught glimpses of the ritual itself. A figure draped in cloth, carried to a boat, floated across the water in a mock sacrifice. He recorded what he could but admitted that inside the Grove, nothing was certain. What's true? What's performance? And what's paranoia? No one outside the club really knows, and if Dancer 1's footage proves anything, it's this. Whatever happens in Bohemian Grove, it was never meant for public eyes. Ivan Lester McGuire was 35 years old, a man who had spent years chasing the thrill of open skies. With over 800 jumps to his name, he wasn't just another skydiver. Friends described him as fearless, focused, and deeply passionate about his work. For Ivan, the air was home. On April 2, 1988, Ivan arrived at the Franklin County Sports Parachute Center in Lewisburg, North Carolina, to film a tandem jump for a promotional video. It was his third jump of the day. Routine, practiced, the kind of job he could almost do from memory. His role was to capture the experience from the air. The plane door opening, the dive, the wind tearing past as the instructor and student floated below him. But that day, something went horribly wrong. The video, later recovered from his camera equipment, shows Ivan stepping out of the plane at 10,500 feet. You can hear the rush of air, see the vast landscape spinning beneath him. He's focused on the tandem pair ahead, adjusting his position for the best shot. But as the seconds pass, something feels off. There's no main chute strapped to his back, just the weight of the camera rig. Somewhere between the clouds and the ground, realization hits. Investigators would later describe the footage as chilling. Ivan notices his mistake too late. He reaches back, searching for a cord that isn't there. The camera shakes violently, then the image cuts out. Search teams found his body later in the nearby woods. The official ruling was a tragic accident, a moment of distraction, a fatal oversight by a man who had made the skies his life's work. In the years since, Ivan's story has a haunting reminder to even the most experienced thrill seekers. Level 2, Mr. Big. On the night of October 1st, 2015, Twitch streamer Mr. Big was live, chatting casually with his viewers when an unexpected sound interrupted the feed. A sharp knock at the door. It was nearly 11:30 p.m., the kind of hour when any visit feels ominous. When he opened the door, 2 police officers were standing outside. They said they were responding to a noise complaint. From the start, the exchange was tense. Mr. Big insisted he hadn't done anything wrong. The officers pressed for identification, but he refused to give his name, standing firm on what he believed were his rights. The argument stretched on, recorded in real time by the camera still streaming to hundreds of viewers. Eventually, the officers placed him under arrest. The chat filled with disbelief as viewers watched him being handcuffed and led out of frame. But what happened next was even stranger. As the stream continued, door ajar, lights still on, a man entered the room. Someone had slipped inside. While Mr. Big was being booked downtown, his apartment was being quietly ransacked. The intruder grabbed what he could: Air Jordans, a gaming headset, a wallet, a phone. All of it taken while thousands unknowingly watched. Viewers, realizing what they were seeing, began contacting police. When officers returned, they discovered the suspect was none other than Mr. Big's own neighbor. He was later arrested and charged with felony burglary. In the end, all of Mr. Big's stolen property was recovered, but the footage remains online. A surreal split screen of modern life. A man asserting his rights on camera, and in the background, the quiet theft that followed. A moment that started as a dispute over noise ended up exposing something far louder: how public and how fragile our private lives have become. Daniel O'Neill's camping trip. Daniel O'Neill, the man behind the YouTube channel English Woodsman, set out that day to film what he thought would be a routine camping video. His viewers knew him for quiet, practical trips, setting up tents, cooking outdoors, and talking gear. This time, though, Daniel had gone farther out than usual, deep into a patch of woodland he'd never visited before. He picked his spot carefully, away from grazing cattle and nearby trails, hoping for the kind of peace and isolation that makes for a perfect backdrop. As he unpacked his camera equipment, though, something felt off. In his raw footage, you can hear him calling out, almost laughing it off, but the edge in his voice is clear. He had been hearing footsteps, at least that's what it sounded like, moving in the brush near him. They weren't heavy enough to be human, not clumsy enough to be an animal. And yet, every time he stopped, they stopped too. He tried to ignore it. Overthinking could ruin a trip, especially on camera. But after his tent was pitched and he'd settled in, the noises returned. Slow, deliberate, dry footsteps circling outside his camp in a forest that was wet and muddy. No one appeared when he checked, and yet the sound was there, captured clearly on his recordings. As night fell, Daniel's unease turned to real fear. The noises grew louder, closer, footsteps maybe, or something trying to sound like footsteps. Later, he said they were animal-like but impossible to describe, unlike anything he had ever heard in the woods before. He didn't wait to find out what it was. Packing up his gear, he left in the dark, abandoning his planned shoot. He never found out what had stalked the edges of his camp that night. All he had was the footage, a string of strange sounds in an empty forest, and a story that left even his followers unsettled. Level 3. Chapecoe's Disaster. On November 28, 2016, the Chapecoense soccer team, known affectionately as CHAP, boarded Lamia Flight 293 with the kind of energy that comes before a once-in-a-lifetime game. The team was on its way to Medellin, Colombia, to play in the Copa Sudamericana Finals, the biggest match in the club's history. Videos taken on board show the players laughing, joking, and filming each other in their seats. "Can't wait to make history," one of them wrote online, snapping a photo of the clouds outside his window. To them, it was a dream come true. They had risen from Brazil's lower leagues to the top of South American football. But what no one on that plane knew was that their flight plan was a fatal one. Somewhere over the Andes, the cockpit voice recorder picked up the first signs of trouble. A pilot's calm voice breaks through the static, noting what looked like smoke trailing from the rear of the aircraft. In reality, it wasn't fire, it was exhaustion. The plane was running out of fuel. As the jet neared Medellin, its power began to fade. Lights flickered. Engines coughed and fell silent. The pilot's final transmission was desperate. He needed to make an emergency landing. Air traffic control cleared the path, but it was already too late. Minutes later, Lamia Flight 293 crashed into the side of a mountain near Cerro Gordo. Of the 77 people on board, only 6 survived. 19 players were gone. The coach, the staff, the journalists covering their story, all lost in a single, devastating instant. The world awoke to the headlines the next morning. Team of Miracles destroyed in air disaster. Tributes poured in from stadiums across the globe. For Brazil, it was more than a tragedy. It was the death of a dream. And for the families left behind, it was a reminder that even the brightest moments can vanish in the dark silence of a night sky. Arab Andy's prank. In May 2018, a YouTuber known as Arab Andy decided to take his live stream pranks to the next level. His channel was built on shock value, disruptions, confrontations, anything that could draw views and donations. But what began as entertainment soon crossed a line that would change his life forever. That day, he walked into a classroom at the University of Washington during an end-of-year reception. Students were gathered around, chatting, celebrating the end of exams. Andy carried only a phone and a small Bluetooth speaker. He lifted them into the air and pressed play. A robotic voice echoed through the room, simulating a bomb threat. Panic broke out. Chairs fell, people screamed, and the sound of footsteps filled the halls as students fled the building. Someone triggered the fire alarm. Across campus, emergency alerts began to spread. Nearby buildings were evacuated. The university's police treated it like a real attack. All the while, Andy's stream kept rolling. Viewers watched in real time as terrified students ran for their lives, unaware that the entire threat was fake, triggered not by ideology or anger, but by a $4 donation from a viewer who wanted to see chaos unfold. It didn't take long for the University of Washington Police Department to track him down. He was arrested within hours and charged with making a bomb threat, a felony that carries serious penalties even when no explosive exists. Investigators confirmed there was never any bomb, just a prank fueled by greed and a warped sense of humor. In court, prosecutors described the fear he caused as immeasurable. The judge set his bail at $75,000 and ordered him off YouTube until trial. Eventually, he was sentenced to 2 years in jail. Level 4. Chris goes to abandoned school. For more than a decade, Robert Fulton Elementary School in Cleveland, Ohio, has been left to rot. The once bustling classrooms where children learned their ABCs now sit silent, covered in peeling paint, shattered glass, and graffiti. For urban explorers, though, the school has become a destination, a decaying labyrinth of history and danger. One of those explorers is Chris Hill, the creator of the Herc Hill channel. He'd ventured into the building once before in 2022 and filmed what he described as seriously unsettling things. 2 years later, curiosity pulled him back. He wanted to see how much worse it had gotten and what new stories its hallways might hold. The building had deteriorated almost beyond recognition. Stairs creaked under his weight as if they might collapse, or sections of the upper floor sagged precariously. In the glow of his flashlight, he saw messages scrawled on the walls. "Don't explore alone. Keep out." The warnings didn't feel like cliches. They felt fresh, like someone had been there not long before. There were other signs, too. Sleeping bags, empty cans, makeshift bedding, suggesting squatters had been living inside the school, maybe even that very night. And from the moment Chris stepped inside, he thought he could hear something. Faint noises echoing through the halls, like footsteps or whispers. But he saw no one. Against his better judgment, Chris pressed on, deeper into the dark. Then, out of nowhere, a man's scream cut through the silence. The sound was raw, violent, close enough to make Chris's blood run cold. Later, reflecting on the experience, he figured the man was probably a squatter, someone who thought Chris was a threat or a thief. But when he reviewed his footage at home, a different picture emerged. Frame by frame, he could see a figure in the background, moving from one doorway to another, watching him, keeping pace but staying out of sight. Chris hadn't been alone in that building for a single second. Sophia McKenna and Spencer Mugford. On Memorial Day weekend in 2018, 21-year-old Sophia McKenna and her friend, 20-year-old Spencer Mugford, set out for what was supposed to be a simple nighttime adventure on the water. They borrowed a small 14-foot sailboat and planned to paddle to the New London Ledge Lighthouse, a lonely structure off the coast of Connecticut, known locally for ghost stories about its long-dead keeper. It was late, close to 2 a.m., when Sophia and Spencer pushed off. Before leaving shore, Sophia had locked her phone in her car, bringing only Spencer's to document the trip. Their friends would later see the last traces of them alive in short Snapchat clips. Spencer smiling as he paddled, Sophia posing beside a weathered concrete wall marked with a single warning: "No trespassing." Silence. When morning came, Spencer didn't show up for his brother's graduation. Sophia missed an afternoon plan with her boyfriend. At first, it didn't seem serious. But when Sophia's mother, Michelle, checked her phone, she noticed something strange. 7 missed calls from an unknown number made just after 2 a.m. all within 4 minutes. When she dialed it back, it went straight to Spencer's voicemail. He had never had her number. That's when it hit her. Those calls must have been from Sophia. Something had gone terribly wrong. Police began searching the waters near the lighthouse, focusing on the coordinates the pair had shared on Snapchat. Within days, their small sailboat washed ashore, empty. A week later, a fisherman discovered Spencer's body 4.5 miles away from the lighthouse. The autopsy listed the cause of death as accidental drowning, but Sophia was never found. Her disappearance left a trail of questions that no investigation could answer. Level 5. Only Use Me Blade stream gone wrong. It was May 2019, and a live stream that started as a typical night of drinking and banter would soon spiral into tragedy. The controversial streamer known as Only Use My Blade was broadcasting alongside another creator, Willie Buckner, a man who, awkwardly, was dating Blade's ex-girlfriend at the time. From the start, the air was tense, the energy uncomfortable. But the night would soon take a turn that no one watching could forget. Willie was on Ambien, a powerful sleep medication prescribed for insomnia. Mixing it with alcohol is dangerous, something anyone with medical knowledge would know, but that didn't stop the stream. In fact, the opposite happened. Viewers began sending in donations, each one encouraging Blade and the others to get Willie to drink more. Every dollar meant another shot, another sip, another slow unraveling. As the alcohol took hold, Willie began losing consciousness, slurring, slumping, fading in and out. Instead of helping him, the others turned it into entertainment. They laughed, drew on his face, and slapped him while the live chat filled with laughing messages. At one point, Willie stirred and tried to stand, Blade's voice can be heard on camera. "I told you, bro." Seconds later, Willie collapsed face first onto the ground. The room went quiet, but not for long. Rather than calling for help, the streamers kept filming, continuing to mock their unconscious friend while viewers watched in horror. By the time someone finally called for medical assistance, it was too late to undo the damage. Willie was rushed to the hospital and placed in intensive care, where he would remain for a week. The stream was deleted soon after, but clips continued to circulate, each one a grim reminder of what had happened. Rhythm Rider discovers body stain. In 2020, urban explorer Rhythm Rider set out to document another forgotten place, an old house on the outskirts of town that had long been left to decay. Locals said it once belonged to an elderly woman who had died under unclear circumstances. No one seemed to know the details, only that the property had been untouched for years, preserved in a kind of uneasy silence. When Ryder stepped through the front door, the air was heavy with dust and the faint smell of cigarettes. Time, it seemed, had stopped here. The furniture remained exactly as it had been left. Newspapers sat yellowing on the tables. A walker rested beside a worn recliner. Squirrels had claimed the attic, but beyond their rustling, the house was eerily still. He moved carefully from room to room, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The upstairs bedrooms were cluttered but intact, full of personal touches. Family photos, perfume bottles, letters from a time before everything fell apart. Downstairs, the story became clearer. The nicotine-stained walls and empty gun cases suggested a couple who had lived quietly, perhaps defensively, through their final years. The husband, Ryder learned from scattered mail, had died first. The woman had lived alone after that. Then, in the center of one room, he saw it. A dark, discolored imprint on the floor, a human-shaped stain. Next to it sat the walker, tipped slightly to one side. In that instant, the pieces fell into place. She had likely fallen there, maybe reaching for help that never came. Hours, maybe days, could have passed before anyone found her. Ryder stopped filming. Later, he said he'd just stood there for 20 minutes, trying to process the reality of what he was looking at. The silent evidence of a life's final moment. When he resumed, he noticed more unsettling details. The gun cases, all empty, drawers pulled open. Signs that someone had been through the house after her death, or perhaps before. No one can say for sure what happened in that quiet home. Whether she died alone of natural causes, or something darker took place, the truth remains buried beneath layers of dust and time. But the stain on that floor told its own story, a quiet, haunting reminder of a life that ended unseen. Level 6. Chris Watts. It was August 13, 2018, when Nicole Atkinson dialed the police in Frederick, Colorado. Her friend, Shannon Watts, had missed a business meeting that morning, something completely out of character. She wasn't answering her phone, hadn't responded to texts, and had also skipped a prenatal appointment. Nicole drove over to check on her, but when she knocked, no one came to the door. The car was in the driveway, the lights were on, but the house was silent. Moments later, Shannon's husband, Chris Watts, arrived home. Calm and almost detached, he allowed the officers to enter the house. Inside, they found the family dog roaming freely, but no Shannon and no sign of the couple's two little girls, Bella and Celeste. Shannon's purse, phone, and wedding ring were all left behind. It didn't make sense. When investigators reviewed a neighbor's security footage, they found their first clue. At 1:48 a.m., Shannon could be seen returning home from a business trip. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. Hours later, Chris's truck appeared on camera. He was backing it into the driveway, loading it with something heavy before driving away. No one else ever left the house. Detectives brought him in for questioning. Chris insisted that he'd last seen Shannon early that morning before work, claiming she had taken the kids to a friend's house. But when he failed a polygraph test, the truth began to unravel. In a separate room, with his father present, he finally broke. First, he claimed that Shannon had killed the children, and he had retaliated in a blind rage. But investigators saw through the lie. The reality was far worse. Chris confessed to killing Shannon in their bedroom after telling her he wanted to separate. When their daughters awoke, confused and crying, he drove their bodies, his wife's and his daughter's, to an oil site where he worked. There, he buried Shannon in a shallow grave and placed Bella and Celeste inside crude oil tanks. The motive was chillingly simple. He wanted to start a new life with his mistress, Nicole Kessinger. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. The court sentenced him to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole. He remains in protective custody, isolated from other inmates for his own safety. Even behind bars, the story doesn't end. Letters and photos from women around the world still arrive for him, proof that even in the darkest cases, fascination and horror often blur into something deeply unsettling. Mr. Deathmoth. On December 10, 2018, Australian streamer Luke Monday, known online as Mr. Deathmoth, was live on Twitch, playing Fortnite for his followers. The stream began like any other. Focused gameplay, casual chat, and donations rolling in. But what unfolded next would end his career and make headlines across the world. In the background, viewers could hear Luke's wife calling to him. She was 4 months pregnant at the time and repeatedly asked him to stop playing and join the family for dinner. Her tone was calm at first, almost pleading. But when he kept ignoring her, the frustration grew. She began throwing small objects toward him, an attempt to get his attention. Then, in an instant, the situation escalated. The camera didn't capture what happened next, but the audio told the story. A sharp sound, a cry, and then her voice, angry, hurt, accusing him of hitting her right in front of their children. The stream kept running, broadcasting the sounds of the altercation to a stunned audience. Viewers reacted immediately, flooding the chat with messages of concern and disbelief. Some clipped the footage and sent it to authorities. Within hours, police arrived at the family's home and arrested Monday on charges of common assault. The fallout was immediate. Twitch permanently banned him from the platform, and his employer, Telstra, suspended him. In court, Monday pleaded guilty, bringing his once thriving streaming career to an abrupt and public end. But the case took an unexpected turn when new details emerged. Both Luke and his wife reportedly had prior incidents of domestic violence against each other. In a separate case, she too was later charged with assault. The story became more complex, less about one viral moment and more about a toxic relationship that had spiraled far beyond repair. Luke Monday ultimately avoided jail time. He was sentenced to 14 months of community corrections, barred from streaming, and left with a reputation destroyed by a few minutes of audio that the internet would never forget. Level 7. 3 guys, 1 hammer. In 2008, a 4-minute video began circulating online, a grainy, brutal recording that would go on to horrify everyone who saw it. It was called 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. The footage showed a middle-aged Ukrainian man lying on the ground in a wooded area, pleading faintly before being struck repeatedly with a hammer by 2 teenage boys. There was no editing, no disguise, no mercy. What viewers didn't yet know was that this wasn't an isolated act of violence. It was a glimpse into one of the most disturbing murder sprees in Ukraine's modern history. Between June and July of 2007, in the industrial city of Dnipro, then known as Dnipropetrovsk, a series of random killings terrorized the region. 21 victims in total, Men, women, children, even animals. Many were attacked as they walked home. Some were robbed, others were killed, simply for the thrill of it. Police struggled to connect the cases. The victims had no common background, no clear motive tied them together. Then, 4 weeks after the murders began, they suddenly stopped. It wasn't until a week later that investigators finally got their first break. One of the victims' phones had been switched on and was being used to make calls. That led police to a group of 3 19-year-olds, Viktor Sayenko, Igor Suprunyuk, and Alexander Hansa. All 3 came from well-off families. They had grown up in relative privilege, educated, comfortable, and seemingly normal. But police searches turned up items belonging to the victims, and, most damningly, recordings of the murders themselves. The killers had filmed their attacks, posing with the bodies, and even taking selfies at grave sites. They seemed proud of what they'd done. When the footage reached the internet, it became one of the most infamous videos ever uploaded. 3 guys, 1 hammer was real, one of the few times a snuff film proved to be genuine. In 2009, Suprunyuk and Sayenko were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Hansa, who had taken part in the robberies but not the killings, received 9 years. Their case remains one of the darkest in the annals of internet crime, a rare, horrifying bridge between the digital world and the unimaginable cruelty of real life. Frances Elaine Campion. On October 2, 2006, a woman named Frances Elaine Campion sat before a camera in her apartment in Ontario, Canada. What began as a video diary about her failed marriage quickly turned into something darker. An emotional outpouring that, in hindsight, read like a confession in slow motion. She spoke directly to the lens, her tone filled with rage and despair. She accused her ex-husband, Leo Campion, and his family of years of physical, emotional, and mental abuse. She said she had cried for help and that no one had listened. Hours later, Frances carried out one of the most shocking crimes in Ontario's history. In her apartment bathtub, she drowned her 2 daughters, 3-year-old Serena and 1-year-old Sophia. When it was over, she dressed them in pajamas, laid them side by side on a bed, and tried to take her own life. But she survived. When police arrived, they found the camera still recording. What it contained was evidence, not only of a mother in psychological collapse, but of intent. The video showed that Frances understood what she was doing, that she knew it was wrong, and that she wanted her ex-husband to suffer the pain she felt. Her trial lasted 7 weeks. The defense argued she was not criminally responsible due to severe mental illness, citing years of psychiatric treatment, suicide attempts, and paranoid delusions. They painted a picture of a woman driven past reason by trauma and abuse. But the prosecution leaned on her own words, the clarity of her speech, the planning, the resentment she expressed in the video. They argued that her actions were deliberate. On November 5, 2010, a jury found Frances Elaine Campion guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years.
Sightseeing flight near